All right, guys, welcome into the first edition of Unrivaled Sports Prep. I'm Joey, and I'm joined here with Cayne Harrison, the newest member of Unrivaled Sports. Thanks for hosting us tonight. Hope we can provide a lot of good information. It's a big time right now. This is the first week of high school sports, or the playoffs. So we've got a big week, especially here locally. We've got 7 teams from Baldwin County, got a handful from Mobile, up through Washington County, and all around the state, south of Montgomery. So big weekend for us.
Yeah, and hopefully we can give you some insight on some of these teams that maybe you see on the schedule but you're not familiar with. And so when these teams come to town, you have an idea of what you're looking at and who they've played and what to expect from these guys.
Yeah. We talked about how Baldwin County's got a handful of teams. Tomorrow night we got Gulf Shores. First, I believe this is the first playoff game hosted at the MIC. So that's a big deal around the city. I know there's a lot of people excited. Orange Beach is also hosting a playoff game tomorrow night. It's the first in their short-lived city school system. A lot of excitement going around town, and we'll dive into those games here as we get through their respected regions and classes. Starting off the bat, man, give me one game that you're above all high school games that you're most excited about this week. First round.
I mean, to be honest, I think a game that's going to come out to the wire to two really, really even teams would be the Faith and Eufaula game. I mean, Eufaula is from the east side of the state, and Faith has to travel all the way over there, but they're both very, very physical. And, I mean, that's a 5A. And, again, Faith is local to us over in Region 1 where, they played Gulf Shores this year, and we've seen them live. And they're a really, really good football team. And I think as a 3 seed, they could go over and beat Eufaula.
So there you have it. Big game, 5A. And it's not the two big seeds in 5A. You've got going through my notes. Sorry, Central Clay and Beauregard. I mean, those are kind of just in this side of the bracket. Those are kind of the two. I'm sorry, that's 6A. No, that's 5A. So the big game, Eufaula and Faith.
Yeah, I think either one of those, whoever wins it, they have opportunity to win the second round as well, and possibly meet back up. I think Gulf Shores and Faith has an opportunity to meet in the third round, and Gulf Shores would host that game, and that would be a big deal if Gulf Shores can win, beat Carroll, and
and then possibly Central Clay County.
Yeah, they have to go up to Central Clay, who's a bunch of winners.
That's a big game. Yep. That would be a big win for them. And we'll dive into that as we get into those respective classes. Let's start out 1A. Region 1. Give me your thoughts on the 1A. That first region.
1A. If you follow high school football, you could probably name 5 or 6 schools that could win it in any year. And I mean, this year really. Leroy's a 1A school this year, and they've been 2A for several years, and they won several state titles as a 2A school. And now they're in a region that's, quite frankly, fairly weak outside of them and Milry. And so both of them get to host games. They're both going to win their first-round games. I mean, Leroy's going to play a Georgiana team that lost 3 games in a row, one of them to a struggling red level team, 12-13, and then they beat a real bad Pleasant home team by 50. But, I mean, Leroy, that score is going to be 50-7. I mean, it's not going to be close. And then same thing, Milry, and again, staying on this side of the state between them, Sweetwater and Maplesville, I mean, they're all going to win. And at the end of the day, you're going to sit here in the second round, and you have Maplesville, Leroy, Brantley, Elba, Sweetwater, Milry, and Lochapoka. I mean, 8 really, really good football teams that any of them could win it. But I think Elba's probably going to end up. I think they're probably the best team in the state. They beat Brantley by a touchdown at home earlier in the year, and if they can beat Sweetwater in that second round, I think them and Brantley will play again in the quarterfinals. But
one thing that kind of stood out to me was this Southern Choctaw team, being 3-6 and heading into the playoffs. Like what? I mean, I know it's 1A. These are smaller schools, and there's not as many, I guess. I mean, there could be, but there's probably not. That's just that. All you got to do is win 3 games, and you're in the
right. Well, when you're in a 17 region, and you win the correct 3 games, you can make it happen. But Southern Choctaw, they were dominant. When Larry Boykin was the head coach there, they were dominant for years and years and won several state titles. COVID came, and they canceled that whole school system. When they canceled that football season in 2020, it absolutely decimated their athletic program because that was their proceeds. That football program paid for everything. And so they being 3-6, it's uncharacteristic, but there's a reason why they're struggling right now because of that, because of COVID and the way it shut down that program and just the lack of funding and getting the kids out. And some of the kids moved to other schools over time to be able to play. One team that's kind of crazy is RC Hatch. They had like a 50-something game losing streak at one time and won a 2A football. And now they're in the playoffs, I think, second time in 3 or 4 years. But the bad thing about those guys is they get to travel all the way up to Maplesville and they get to deal with those guys. And that's not going to be a whole lot of fun for them. Those guys and people like Keith, they get to hang out with Lochapoka. It's just not going to be a good night for them. But
this, and I was kind of get to this when we got to 5A because Gulf Shores does have so many of these guys that play both sides of the football. This kid, this 5-star defensive lineman who also plays tight end.
Yeah, I think I misprint. He's actually over here with Highland Home in 2A.
Yeah,
but we definitely can jump over to 2A.
That'd be a good segue into 2A. How difficult is it for, especially when you get into these playoff games, these kids and I know that these kids are 16, 17, they got more energy than I've had in 15 years. But how hard is it for these kids that do play both ways to go up? Now you're not just playing another region game. You're playing these playoff games where you're playing some of the other good teams in the state. Like, how do they fare normally? Because Gulf Shore, there's several kids in our area that play both ways, and that's just kind of been something I've thought about going in, which is how do they normally fare going into these bigger games?
The difference between Gulf Shore's kids playing both ways and the kid at Highland Home or Lynette or one of these smaller schools playing both ways is Highland Home are beating people by 50 points. So even though the kid's playing both ways, he's really not asked to do a lot the entire game. They may have 2 or 3 close games throughout the season, but, Gulf Shores, they had several really, really difficult games. And, you got linemen playing both ways. It's very, very taxing on them. And, if you're fortunate to have 2 squads, offense and defense, then I think it's a huge advantage. Depending on the style of play. If you're running football a lot and, you only got 40 plays in a game, it's not as big of a deal. But some of these guys are getting 60, 70 plays sometimes, and it's it's going to be really taxing on the skill kid for sure. I think more so than the lineman.
Well, there's some teams that jump out to me here in 2A. That there's one game in particular, the Vincent Yellow Jackets. I guess they're still the Yellow Jackets. They were the Yellow Jackets when my grandpa went there. So I have ties into to Vincent, and then against Luverne, for God's sakes. Luverne is we've got ties there too. So that's the one I'm kind of looking at 2A just because the names stick out to me. But then you got J.D. Blackshear, Highland Home's in there, and Clark County. Clark County's been a very good team in the past. Kind of break down Region 1 and what you think.
Well, 2A as a whole, Clark County with Stacy Luker coaching that team. He's at Sweetwater for several years. I mean, they're always going to be really, really physical. I mean, they have Cottonwood in the first round. These guys, I mean, that's probably not going to be very close. But, going back to Vincent Luverne, they always have they have good football players. Just depends on how, things move their way certain years. I mean, they hold the state record for playoff appearances in a row. And, Vincent's region, with B.B. Calmer, they haven't traditionally been very good. I know they had a really good running back a couple of years ago that kind of put them on the map. I think they had some success there. But, I don't think their region has prepared them to play. I mean, I think it's going to be a really good game with them and Luverne because Luverne, I mean, it's a big difference playing Highland Home and Reeltown and even Lynette. I mean, Lynette won basketball, football, basketball within a 3 or 4 year period. And now they're sitting over here at the 4 seed. I mean, B.B. Comer's going to have their hands full with Lynette.
Yeah.
But, they had the Story kids who committed to Alabama. I think they're both at Alabama now. And, I mean, the one kid holds the state record for scrimmage yards in a career. And so he's sitting up at Alabama right now. So they lose those couple kids, and now they're a 4 seed in a really tough 2A region. I mean, I wouldn't be – I mean, they may go 4-0, to be honest with you. I mean, depending on who B.B. Comer's handing the football off to.
Well, I tell you, I do kind of like what could potentially be a pretty good second-round matchup, Reeltown and GW Long. I think that would be a fun game to watch. But even I mean, yeah, you're right. The B.B. Comer and Lynette game. I mean, they're gonna have their hands full in that first game, so we can't. It's kind of hard, That's kind of like I think here would be probably the biggest game in 2A in that first round.
Yeah, the biggest chance for a 4 seed to win. I don't think the rest of them really have a chance.
Yeah.
Cottonwood, Chickasaw, who's the other one? Thorsby. I mean, they're not going to beat. I mean, Reeltown.
I don't see Thorsby beating Reeltown.
There's no way. I mean, Reeltown, they have so many athletes at Thorsby. They're not going to understand how to deal with that very well, I imagine. But, one team that's really good 2A is, Isabella. I mean, they've been to quarterfinals twice. Tate Leonard took that program over a few years ago, and they haven't been very good at all. And they've won 10 games in a season 5 times, and 4 of them's been under Tate. And he's obviously a difference maker, and every year they're getting better and better. And right now, they're sitting down here at 8-2, and unfortunately they have Highland Home in the first round, but I mean, they'll look back and Highland's probably going to be in the semis. Probably play in Reeltown, to be honest. So,
do you have the name of that kid at Highland Home, that 5-star?
Is he
on our?
He actually made the Alabama North-South team. He's
Man, I can't read.
There
he is. Kadarius Shepard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of a guy we want to watch tomorrow night.
But we can discuss the All-Star team. 90% of the South All-Star team are from large schools, 5 and 6A schools, 7A schools. Then you got a kid down at Highland Home who's making that squad. I mean, that really shows you what type of athlete he is, and people are seeing him on film. I mean, there's a kid. I think there's one from Lochapoka on there. Yeah, so I mean, if you're a 2A at those schools and you're making these teams, I mean, you're probably under recruited at this point just because of the type of offense they run or just the exposure in general. It's tough whenever you're running wing T and you're Division I wideout or something, So.
Well, moving on to 3A. And we talked beforehand how this region 1 in 3A is very deceptive. And there's still a lot of good teams. There's a lot of good teams in 3A. Especially when down here most of our schools are 4 and up. We've got Excel, Opp, Dadeville, Thomasville, Houston Academy. I mean, you've got some big name teams, Pike County, and even Mobile Christian. Just kind of looking through who's those top 16 teams.
Well, for years, 3A was really, really difficult because T.R. Miller and Bayside Academy was sitting in that first region with Excel, and that really what's prevented them from having an opportunity to be really successful. You talk about the Region 1 in 3A, Mobile Christian is the 4 seed because they had to forfeit 4 games to start the season. So, you can look at the record all you want. They actually beat Excel in the regular season, and they would be region champs, but they had to forfeit the game because they had an ineligible kid. But it was crazy because they forfeited the 3 or 4 games, and I don't know, maybe they were trying to figure out the roster, but they ended up losing 2 other games in overtime by a total of 3 points. So, I mean, they're the best 3-7 team in the state right now, maybe the country. I mean, who knows? But
so even with Houston Academy hosting them, I mean that's not really. If Mobile Christian wins, that's not really an upset.
So Mobile Christian's really well coached, and I watched Houston Academy and Pike County play last weekend, and I can tell you, if you were to put those rosters beside each other, you line those kids up, Mobile Christian looks like a better team overall. I mean, Houston Academy, they've had a great year. They're undefeated. They're 10-0, and that's awesome. But unfortunately, they have Mobile Christian coming into town, and they got some really good kids, and they're going to have a problem with those guys. I wouldn't be surprised if Mobile Christian wins that game and ends up having to play Trinity in the second round. But
well, then you got Region 3 and 4 down here. Those matchups. I don't know. I mean, Dadeville to me. I don't know. I don't know much about Southside Selma to even know. I know that Dadeville in the past has been pretty decent, and they've had a decent year this year. Obviously, being that first seed.
Well, there's 2 schools in Selma, and so you got Southside and you got Selma High School. But I mean, Southside they're a 4 seed for a reason, and Dadeville's going to probably. I mean, Southside's going to have some athletes, but I think Dadeville's going to have an opportunity to do what they want to do there. Even talking about this bracket, Excel, as good as they are, like they're really, really big. If you see them online, like they have 2 humongous offensive linemen, and they have 2 really good running backs, and they run basically a version of the single wing, and so they're not throwing it around. The quarterback looks like he's 230 pounds. He's a big kid, but they are so physical. And Pike County, I think at halftime you might turn on the game, it might be 7-6, but then at the end, XL may end up being 27-6 or something. They're so physical. And I watched them play Chipley, Florida last week. Chipley is absolutely loaded at wide out, and their quarterback slings it all over the place. And really, if XL had another quarter, they were pounding on them pretty good. And I think they could have ended up figuring out a way to tie it up, but Chipley, they were better than XL overall, but I think XL will wear them down. And I think they have a good chance to beat Randolph County in the second round and be able to, probably match up with Mobile Christian again. And that's probably a matchup they might not want, to be honest.
So looking at it, because there are some good teams in this bracket.
Sure.
Who are you most likely we're going to see in the finals?
I think the 2 teams out of this bracket in the semifinals, I think you end up with probably. I'm just going to say I think Mobile Christian is going to be there, and then I think from the top side of it is probably going to be, probably St. James. I mean, I don't think Ops as good as they think they are, but I mean they haven't had a whole lot of success. I mean, they've had years where they haven't won very many games as of recent. So these kids are still learning how to do this, Yeah. And so I think St. James and Mobile will be
potential third round. You'd have second, third round, potential third round, XL and Mobile Christian.
Yeah, 100%. I think that could definitely happen, depending on who Randolph County's throwing the ball to, because they always have wideouts. I mean, they got good athletes there too, but. I mean, XL is so big. They run their type of offense they run is really, really difficult to prepare for if you haven't seen it and you didn't know it was coming until that week. Because it's not like Randolph County is going to practice it this week because they got to win. Alabama Christian probably gives them a decent game, and so they have a week to try to figure out the single win. It's really difficult.
Well, moving into the meat and potatoes of the Alabama High School Sports Association, athlete, whatever, 4A, and hitting one of our first major. Actually, there's three local teams here. Orange Beach would Orange Beach be the 4 seed?
They're the 2 seed in that region.
2 seed.
Yep. Behind T.R. Miller.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean.
Well, kind of break 4A down for me. Obviously there's going to be some people pretty excited about Orange Beach. They get BT Washington in the first round. I remember when I lived in Tuscaloosa, it was like Sipsey Valley just became a school system. And so, to see them of course, now that's been almost 10 years, 10 or 11. And to see them in the playoffs, I don't know how good they are. I know Anniston's going to be quite a hill they got to climb there. So Orange Beach looks, if they get a win, has a very tough road ahead in that second round.
Well, I think Orange Beach beats BT Washington. They're going to be better coached. I think the kids are better. I think we're tougher coming in. I know, that's without seeing a whole lot of BT Washington. I turned them on the other day and I found a game online. And I just think overall it's going to be one of the things where if it's even close at halftime, then we'll pull away in like the fourth quarter, and just because we're going to be better coached. Anderson's, they're just super. They were handing the football off to guys who. Orange Beach has a really good running back too now. they have good kids at that quarterback. The running back we're handing it off to. Defensively, we rallied to the football. So, Anderson and Orange Beach, they're both handing the football off to really, really talented running backs. Unfortunately, all that's great, but you got Montgomery Catholic sitting down there, and they're on the whole nother level. They could probably win 5A or 6A. They could compete with 6A schools. I watched them play Andalusia, and Andalusia is a really good team, well coached, and that second half of that football game, it was a 1-point game at halftime. They ended up beating them by like 20 or so. And Andalusia is not a team to give up 50 points in a game, and they did it kind of easily right there. But, in my opinion, you got Montgomery Catholic, Andalusia, Anniston, and Hanley. Then you kind of got everybody else. But, that's why you got to play the game, T.R. Miller, I'm just kind of curious to see what they do with Montgomery Academy, because last year Montgomery Academy was a lot better last year, but they're going to run into a buzzsaw with Hanley.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens there.
Even West Blockton making this, that's another team that just you don't really think about it. You even think they're 4A now. I don't know how long they've been 4A. I don't feel like it's been since I lived up that way, but
several years. I think this is probably at least the third rotation of it. But yeah, they haven't won more than 6 games since 2014. So you got kids sitting in here, and they're in the playoffs. Congratulations, because that's better than half the other teams. Right now they're sitting at 6-4. But again, you got Hanley. You got to roll it to Hanley, and they're just not going to be able to run with those guys at all. There's not, in my opinion, there's not a whole lot of close games in the first round. If this is very similar to 1A, to me, all the host teams are going to win these games. Jackson is going to be deceptive for Andalusia, but I'm telling you, Andalusia is so well coached that they'll eventually wear out Jackson and make it happen. They're not going to lose Jackson in the first round, and they'll probably end up. If Orange Beach can beat Anniston, it'll be Andalusia and Anniston or Orange Beach in the quarterfinals. But,
well, if you watched the live show tonight, then you know that we talked about doing the Unrivaled tailgate live from Ed's Drive-In in Jackson next weekend. It doesn't even look like if they won, they'd get the host. but it doesn't even look like they're going to make it out of the first round with a steep climb against Andalusia. So sorry, everybody. We probably won't be making a dad's drive in next Friday night.
And if Anniston and Orange Beach, they both win, Orange Beach is going to have to travel to Anniston. It's just the way the bracket's set up. They draw regions to say, hey, who's on top of the bracket. Anniston's at the very top of the bracket. So, they basically have home field against everybody that they're probably going to end up playing, which is, fantastic for those guys. It rotates every year. And so, even if Orange Beach wins, they have to roll up to Anniston next week, which, isn't bad. I mean, second round is second round. You just got to go play.
With 4A being so top heavy, is this a region where do we see a big upset? You got Montgomery Catholic that we talked about, but I mean, is this an Anniston versus Hanley final?
I think it's Montgomery Catholic, Anniston, Hanley type of thing this year. I mean, I still think Andalusia is really, really good, but I just can't imagine anybody's going to play with Montgomery Catholic. The only upset I see rolling into this that's possible would be Jacksonville versus Bibb County. That would be. I know Jacksonville's super athletic. I've seen them play some teams up there, and I remember the region they were in 2 years ago, when they was in the playoffs. I went and watched them play live. They're a really, really athletic group. And Bibb County's coached really well, but they don't have the same type of big kids as they did several years ago when they were going 9-1 and 10-0 with Gohagen as their coach, and they got good linemen. They just don't have the big backs.
So potentially, I mean, you could even have, get outside this first round, roll into the quarters. You're going to have some decent games in the quarterfinals, but really those semifinals, those 4 games could really be.
Oh man!
Or 2 games could be huge. Those last 4 teams.
Yeah, them last 4. If you got Anniston, Andalusia, Montgomery Catholic, and Hanley, those 4. That's nobody wants to play either one of those teams. I promise you, they're really, really good.
All right, we're moving on to 5A. It's got some good teams, real good teams. And you have some good teams from Region 1 as well that really could have a potential to Region 1 go undefeated. But, it's tight.
Region 1, if Williamson had a better offense, then this region would go undefeated. Gulf Shores is going to beat Carroll. Carroll is in Ozark, in case you don't know. It's Carroll of Ozark. They're over by Enterprise, Dothan area.
The Wiregrass.
Yeah, the Wiregrass. So they have to come all the way over. It's a heck of a drive. You're talking 3 hours or so for them to get down here. Yeah, that's it. They'll probably come through Andalusia, come through Evergreen, through 84, hit 65, and come on down, more than likely. But Carroll is. They're 2 totally different teams. Carroll's athletic. Gulf Shores is athletic, but Carroll's going to have athletes, similar to, Viger or Faith or something, but they're just not going to be coached well enough to deal with Gulf Shores. I think Gulf Shores is a lot better coached team. UMS Wright, they'll beat Headland by like 60 points or however bad they want to do it. It's not going to be close. And then Faith, I said that earlier. I think Faith and Eufaula might be. If I lived over near Eufaula, I would 100% go to this game. It's going to be really, really good. Eufaula runs, they're going to run the ball 95% of the time. Faith will too. They're going to direct snap it to quarterbacks. They're going to run Wildcat stuff all night. And, Faith, you're like, okay, they're the 3 seed. But really, they were up, I think, 20-7 on UMS Wright at halftime.
Yeah.
And UMS Wright, that's what makes them so good. Is after halftime they came out and they understood, they made adjustments and Faith didn't. They may have, but it didn't work. And UMS Wright just basically said, okay, here's the things that you're doing, and they shut them out in the second half and ended up beating them by a point and beat them. I think it was 21-20. And really Faith had their number in the first half. And so Faith is a really, really good football team. And if I promise you, Charles Henderson does not. I mean, Charles Henderson is a really tough team, but they're not athletically as good as Faith is. And so, whoever, I think if Faith beats Eufaula, then they'll end up in the quarterfinals, probably against UMS Wright. To be honest.
The big dogs in this one. We watched them a couple weeks ago, Central Clay County and Beauregard, and game was close right up until halftime. And then, all Central Clay County did was flex in the second half and blow them out. Beauregard in the first round against Marbury is just, that we can kind of just scratch. We can just scratch those two games in this region. UMS Wright against Headland, and then Beauregard Marbury. That second round game, UMS Wright. That's one of those where it's like, obviously UMS Wright will host that game, even though if I'm reading the bragging on it, Beauregard's the higher seed
compared to
UMS Wright.
Yeah, so UMS is. So whoever wins, they'll have to come down to UMS Wright.
Yeah.
So if Beauregard wins, then they'll come down to UMS Wright. With that being said, you think about Beauregard, and if you follow football several years ago, they had a kid in 2015, LaDamian Webb. He won Mr. Football. They won a state title. They were unbelievable. And then they kind of fell off the map. After 2017, the kid was there for 3 years, starter, great football player. But these seniors, you think back, that really wasn't that long ago. 6 years ago, 7 years ago, they won a state title. And then now you got a group of seniors at Beauregard who up to this point won 9 games in the last 3 years. And now they're sitting at 9-1. Justin Jones, this is his second year. He absolutely builds programs back from nothing. He started Florello's 1A school, built them back. He had a guy win an assistant coach of the year down there. Went to New Brockton, set several years scoring records for that school, won more games than anybody really. He was at Prattville for a year, defense coordinator on a really, really good team. Had an Alabama commit playing outside linebacker, but now he's sitting at Beauregard and he's turning them around. And what's crazy is if you see teams like Beauregard, they're up. If you don't know who they are, they're up by Auburn. They're basically on the other side of the interstate from Auburn. Well, 2 years ago they had a kid, Easton Harris. He was a 4-star offensive lineman. He was at Beauregard up until his senior year. And when that coach got let go or moved on, he moved over to Auburn High School, and now he's with the Auburn Tigers, the college team. And so these kids are going to fluctuate across that interstate. Beauregard starts winning. If they come down here and beat UMS, and you may have an opportunity where Beauregard starts really, they could really turn it on and do some good things. But, just kind of give you an idea of what you're looking at. If you're UMS Wright people and high school football, that's something to keep an eyeball on in the coming years.
Well, I don't think UMS Wright getting that home game's all that worried.
No.
That place is, and I know I'll probably get in trouble, but going there and playing is it's a little tricky, and it has been for several teams in the past. So I don't know if UMS Wright's totally worried about Beauregard coming up to over to Mobile. On the other side of the bracket, Central Clay County has Hopeful, and Hopeful is 3-7 and hasn't won a playoff game since my sister was born in '93. So that just made me feel really old. What do you think about that game?
If you watch Central Clay play, their offensive line is unbelievable. Yeah. They don't have these huge kids, but they're very similar to UMS Wright. To be honest with you, like their offensive line plays so hard that it'll absolutely just hurt your whole team demeanor because you can't do anything with them. Their tight end is very physical. They have a really, really good running back to hand it off to. They are really, really good on the offensive side of football. They're not going to score a ton of points, but they will absolutely grind it down your throat. And Hopeville, these kids, they're just happy to be here. I would think, and they get to go up Central. Central.
They get to play one more game.
Central Clay County, they're in Lineville. So if you follow football, Central Clay, it used to be Lineville High School and Clay County High School, and they were both 2A schools. And Clay County, I think, still holds the record for consecutive wins in the state of Alabama. And it was in the early 2000s. Well, they closed both these schools and they combined them into Central Clay. Well, Danny Horn, who was at Central Clay, ends up, I think, took a year off or whatever he was doing. He ends up coming back to Central Clay and taking over the program, wins back-to-back state titles. So these kids at Central Clay, they have brothers and cousins and dad, all sorts of people running around state championship rings, and everybody's telling them you should win state championships. And, I think this year, just because of their offensive line and that running back that they have, I think the only 3 teams on this schedule that could have a chance against them is Faith, UMS, and Beauregard, just because I saw how they play. I think Gulf Shores will give them a good game, but I don't know if we're physical enough defensively up front to deal with the way these linemen are going to come off this football. I'm telling you, it's going to be a really, really good game. But unfortunately, Gulf Shores got to go to Central Clay, and I guarantee you, whoever's ref in that game, they probably have a state championship ring in a glass case somewhere too. So.
I've got kinfolk. I don't know. People say kinfolk. That just make me sound really country. I have kinfolk in Clay County that played. I know they play football, but I've recently had a cousin that played softball, and man, the competitiveness just in that area for high school sports is probably. It rivals one of the toughest in the state. There's a lot of competitiveness in Clay County when it comes to these high schools. Next, you got another decent game. I haven't seen a lot of Elmore County, but I think Demopolis and Elmore County could be a pretty good game. What does Demopolis got to do to really just hit their stride, stand out?
Their region is not very good. And so they played, earlier in the year, they played American Christian and Jackson week 1 and 2. And since then, they really haven't had a whole lot of issues or really tough games. And so, Elmore County, I remember watching them from last year, and they're sound. They're going to be a sound team. Defensively, they're going to line up correctly. Offensively, they're going to actually – they run a decent offense, and they're going to have wide receivers they can throw to. I don't know if Demopolis really knows how good they are yet, just because of their schedule. When you're number 2 seed at Selma in your region, you really for them. I would think they already knew they were going to win the region, and then they're just trying to stay healthy to get to this point and see who they drew. And I assume they win it, but I don't know. I really haven't. I would love to be able to watch all these games and see these guys because I really have no idea how good Demopolis is, to be honest with you.
Thankfully, with technology, they've made it a little easier to watch all these games.
Yeah, you can get some of them.
So what you get on Friday night, you're just clicking. It's like watching Sunday Ticket on Sunday. So, we talked about Beauregard. We talked about Gulf Shores, Demopolis. And we haven't really touched on Selma and Tallahassee.
So I was talking to some coaches this morning about these two teams. And this is what they told me. They said, Tallahassee lines up and they play man covers the whole game. They're athletic. They're okay. But Selma has skilled guys that they're not used to seeing. Even though Tallahassee is very athletic, Selma, they're just really athletic guys. And they're going to throw the thing up if they can get time. Their forte is not pass blocking or really run blocking. They're just going to toss the thing out there and see if their athletes can make it happen. I watched the Selma-Marbury game, and Marbury was moving in slow motion compared to Selma. They were throwing at the kids, and you didn't even see him, and he's standing in the end zone. He's so fast. And Tallahassee, they're going to line up, and they're going to try to man cover these guys and keep everybody in the box to prevent the quarterback from – they got a little running back at Selma that's 5 feet tall they're going to try to swing it out to. But I think Selma ends up – they're either going to score 50 on them or they won't score anything on them. And it just depends on if Tallahassee can match up with them man for man and gets pressure on that quarterback. Don't let him get the ball out. So I think Selma ends up winning it, but it'll be, again, it's like a feast or famine matchup type of thing. But I mean,
well, we do have. I mean, so far, just looking at these 16 teams in 5A, I mean, there's Charles Henderson Williams. I mean, that may be like you just touched on some mentality. I mean, that either one of those games. The rest of these games, I mean, the second round is going to be very interesting. It's kind of like the other class. Just that the semifinals, the quarterfinals will be great, but the semifinals are going to be could have potential to be loaded. With a lot of talent there. So, well, I kind of think I know where you might go. What do you think about 5A in the finals? I mean, are we Central Clay and UMS, or are we looking at a rematch? Central Clay and Beauregard.
I'd love to see Gulf Shores control the game against Central Clay. And the reason why I say that is because I watched Beauregard take the football. They ran it all the way down the field and took up 10 minutes of the game and ended up kicking a field goal. And then they got Central Clay to go 3 and out. They ended up having the football back, ended up fumbling it. But they had an opportunity really to open that game up. They were first and goal at like the 3-yard line and just had unfortunate events. But Central Clay does that to you. So I think Gulf Shores is physical enough offensively that really if they can control this game early and they can beat Central Clay, then I put them realistically, they could be playing Faith Academy again. I mean, it could be Faith, UMS, Gulf Shores, and Charles Henderson sitting there. I mean, depending on if Beauregard shows up. Beauregard has 2 really, really big running backs. He's number 1. You can look him up on Huddle or however online. He's number 1. The kid's 6-something. He's 230 pounds. He had 200-something yards in several games. Just huge, hurdling kids. I mean, he's huge and physical. Quarterback is the OC's son, so they do a really good job of play calling. They run a lot of bunch sets. So they do it. They actually game plan people, and so they'll catch people in weird scenarios. And if they like it, they'll go really fast. And just like UMS, if they catch them in something next week, they're going to stay in it until. And really, if Beauregard can find something in the second half, and UMS doesn't have time to adjust, they could realistically make that a football game and have a chance to beat them. So, but if I was a betting man and I had to make a choice, I would probably say UMS and probably. Faith are going to meet back up, to be honest with you. I think those are the best 2 teams down here just by watching them.
Well, I know that after the way that last game ended, Faith would probably like to get another shot at those guys.
Gulf Shores only lost to Faith by a touchdown.
Yeah.
And UMS the same way, so it's not like they're on another supreme level.
Yeah.
I mean, Gulf Shores, they just have to – it's just really tough to get them the second time. And when UMS and Faith are used to these types of environments, and Gulf Shores, now you got kids who've never played more than 10 games in the season, really. And now all of a sudden you're telling them, hey, you're in game 13 against kids who've done it 3 or 4 years in a row. It's just a mindset. I mean, it's hard to stay focused that long of a season. I mean, that's a long time. And, if they can do it, Gulf Shores, I think talent-wise, they could do it. It's just, can they? Can the coaches make them focus for that long to, want to move forward.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to those 5A games, not just for Gulf Shores, just because of the talent level. There's a lot of good teams right there. So that'll be fun to watch this weekend and going forward. Next up on 6A, I went to a 6A school. They're 5A for the longest time, but then they recently, Pinson Valley was a 6A school. They didn't make a cut this year. Patrick Nix left after Bo graduated, and they just hadn't been on the same page ever since. But there's a lot of familiar teams to me, even with Region 1, but also just from up there where I am. You got Pelham, Hillcrest, Homewood, Hueytown, Northridge, just a lot of teams I'm familiar. Benjamin Russell. But then even Region 1, we've got some good St. Paul, Spanish Fort, Theodore, and Saraland. So I think it's another loaded bracket. I mean, the best teams are there.
So one thing that I was looking at something earlier. I was trying to remember the kid's name. So Carver of Montgomery, they have 2 5-star linemen, defensive linemen. One of them's the number 1 player in the state. The other one's another, I think he's like 6 or 7 or something. And it was, I pulled some stuff up on it, and it's kind of like, if you remember back, it was 2012 when Auburn High School, they had Rashawn Evans and Reuben Foster on the same defense, and they both ended up. They're both playing in the NFL, and they're both All-Americans at Alabama. I mean, they were unbelievable. And you watch these 2 dudes. I mean, they're on a whole. They're both Under Armour All-Americans. I mean, on a team that. I mean, there's a lot of football players in the country, and these 2 dudes are on the same defensive line. So I mean, you look at that. That's like St. Paul's. Since Steve Mask left, those guys, they're not the same type of team. I don't know if it's because they're just not getting kids or whatever, but if he was there, I think they would be physical enough to be able to maybe outcoach them. I don't know, run away from them, do whatever they got to do. He would be doing wild formations to take advantage of these kids' athleticism. But they have Rusall. With Carver, they got Rusall, who's the first team All-State last year as a junior, and then the James Smith kid is number 1 player in state Alabama. He was actually going to go to IMG, and I think he actually went down and enrolled and ended up coming back. I kind of remember that story, but I know he was actually in IMG and come back. Their head coach was actually the defense coordinator for or was the defensive line coach at Prattville 2 years ago. It was Justin Jones was the defense coordinator there, and he was his defensive line coach. And so, I know Coach Jones really well, and he has a lot of good things to say about, Marcus Gardner and his ability to relate to the kids and get them to play really hard. I mean, Carver's always athletic, but he just gets the kids to play really hard, and it shows. They're sitting over here at 8-1. Took the last week of the season off to prepare for the playoffs, and they probably knew they were, with Pike Road being down a little bit, they knew they were going to be in that situation. But the one thing about them, though, is 2 weeks ago they played Lanier, and there was a fight on the field, and the quarterback and a couple other kids. If you come off the sideline in a high school football game, the refs are actually they don't care about the kids on the field. They just take the numbers of the kids who leave the sideline. And actually, Carver's quarterback got a 2-game suspension by the state, and so he's out this week. But, I mean, if St. Paul's going to be able to score enough points, I don't know. I can't imagine they will, but you never know. St. Paul's still got a lot of good kids on their team, too. They're winners for sure.
I think that's pretty interesting. Just you touched on the 2 coaches. Justin Jones, Beauregard in the playoffs, and then you've got Marcus Gardner, who's at Prattville now. He's the success these coaches can have. Just Prattville was a pretty big school for a time, and I mean now he's at Carver. Just the success. These are not just high school coaches. Like these are guys that may have success not only at a high school level, but could be potential names in the future at a college level, or something like that. So I think it's always kind of cool just to see these names that you see it in college all the time. You see it like Kirby. Kirby leaves Alabama, goes. He's the head coach of Georgia now. Look at the success Kirby's had. I mean, it's really cool seeing that on a high school level. So, pretty cool there.
I think another couple notes with this, Hillcrest Tuscaloosa, they score a lot of points. They got a kid, unfortunately, he's a quarterback, and he's committed to Iowa, who scores like 3 points a game right now. So
lucky,
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say he changes that commitment unless they get a new OC over at Iowa. But he tore his ACL, and so he's out for the rest of the year. And he was kind of their catalyst. And so, Calera, I don't know. I mean, they're just kind of hit and miss, and they're just kind of relying on kids more than they do coaches. I feel like I think Hillcrest is still good enough to beat them. They're super athletic. They just whenever your signal caller, who's probably the leader of your team, is out, and you don't have and you're not prepared. I don't know. I mean, let's see how prepared they are for it. Obviously, he's been out several weeks, and they've still continued to win. But they were off last week, the last week of the year. They took that as their bye week. But I think they'll still beat Calera. But
yeah. Well, the next game on that bracket, a couple of years ago, I haven't kept up with Wetumpka much recently, but a couple of years ago, the Saraland-Wetumpka game would be just a big game. What's the deal with what's the eligibility issue going on at Saraland?
Well, so the developing story, the whole idea was that, one of their kids moved from Daphne to Saraland, but they didn't make a bona fide move. And what that means is they actually have to, you don't have to sell the house that you're living in, but you actually have to go to a home and say, hey, this is my primary residence. This is where I'm going to receive my mail. This is where my tax, this is my homestead. And at that point, you basically contribute to the tax base of that school system. And, people keep their eyeball, especially good players, just like the Saraland quarterback who moved down to Orange Beach. I mean, people keep their eyeball on these things. And they hired an investigator to go out, and they surveyed the kid's home where he left in Daphne. And supposedly they were saying his father was staying there several nights a week, sleeping, and he didn't make a bona fide move. Like, they didn't commit to living in Saraland. They were still half and half in this thing. You can't do that. Like, you have to commit to it, and that way your tax base and everything is correct. Well, it was just like 2 days ago, the private investigator comes out, and who knows, but he says, well, come to find out, the dad isn't living there. He's just working there. I think they have like they raise, certain breeds of dogs or something. They have a kennel there, and he's there working, and he can't verify whether or not he was sleeping there. Most people don't sleep where they work, I would think. I get it if you do, but the investigator kind of come out. I guess he was pressured to say yay or nay to, is it legit? And the guy ended up having to come out and tell the whole story. I don't know why it was weird up front, but that's kind of, right now, they're good to go. I mean, and I think they're going to, with Wetumpka, they went to finals several years ago, but they're not the same. I mean, they got beat by Central Clay the last game of the year. So that was a really physical football game. A week ago, they're down. They just lost. Now they got to travel down to Saraland. It's a team that, is, top 2 or 3 in the state. I mean, it's just, I don't foresee their morale being very high.
53-10 in the last 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. Jeff Kelly, when he took over the program, he's been really, really good. I mean, it's over 10. I mean, it's 10 plus wins a year, and it's probably one of the easiest reasons he's had in a while. Just overall, I know the Theodore and stuff is coming in, but Spanish Fort used to be unbelievable when Blackman and them were there, and now, I mean, it's just not the same. And so he's kind of got a break that Steve Mask has went on to another school. Blunt isn't running around with 5-star defensive linemen everywhere. And McGill isn't juggernaut, so he's kind of all of a sudden got a little break, and he's taking advantage of it, and I think they'll definitely end up in the third round just because Hillcrest is – I think they'll probably Spanish Fort play again in the quarterfinals.
Well, I think, because you mentioned St. Paul's not being able to score enough points, even though Carver's quarterback's out, he gets to come back next week.
Mm-hmm.
So if Carver advances, I haven't seen much of Northridge in years, but, I mean, Pelham's was always pretty good when I was growing up, up that way. So, I mean, that, Carver Montgomery versus Pelham, I mean, they get their quarterback back, that you're looking at, probably semifinal team in 6A, I would think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could be it could be those guys, and I mean they'll have to go through Theodore, but
Is that a game, a Theodore Hueytown game? I mean, obviously we were picking Hueytown to get past Benjamin Russell, but Theodore Hueytown.
I don't know. I mean, Hueytown, they usually, I mean, they beat Gardendale last week by 2 touchdowns, and Gardendale is usually very well coached. So
Gardendale was always really good in T-ball. We got a hold of Gardendale when I was about 7, and in the All-Stars, man, I know it's just nothing about what we're talking about, but I've always just had kind of this hatred toward Gardendale.
Well, they usually are pretty sporty, and I know Hueytown has great facilities up there, and those people love that place. And they have, I mean, I don't see why they can't beat, obviously, Benjamin Russell. But what's great, Hueytown gets to come down to Theodore. It's just unfortunate because the second round of a lot of these brackets are so good, and a lot of those games are going to be in Mobile or Baldwin County, and you're just not going to be able to go see all of them.
Yeah.
And it's, you wish they were a little bit later, but I think the Hueytown-Theodore game is going to be really, really good just because of the athleticism of both of those teams.
Well, depending on, it looks like Spanish Fort's traveling to Pike Road and then would have to turn around and probably travel to Homewood.
Yep, they would. Homewood's a lot further away than Pike Road is. So.
I mean, and let's say they win those two, their next game could be back in
Saraland.
At Saraland, but they could have to travel to Hillcrest. So that's where it gets finicky for them. I mean, that's a lot of traveling for a high school team. It's good Spanish Fort, has been, and like I said, you got them getting past Pike Road. That Homewood, even McAdore's in a slouch. So, Spanish Fort versus either of those two teams in the next round. I mean, they get past that and come back to Saraland. That's going to be a pretty big game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, you could have some really, really good games in our area in the next several weeks. So hopefully you don't have any vacations planned and go to these games. I know next week I'm going to UMS Wright and Beauregard just because I like the way they both play, and I just like to see it in person. But
well, man, moving on to the last class and the smallest. 7A is newer to Alabama. I mean, I think it's only about the 4th or 5th year had 7A, maybe less.
Mm-hmm.
Only 8 teams. 4 of them from right here in our area. Baker, well, not 3. Is that right? 3?
We got Foley, Mary G, Fairhope, and Baker.
Yeah. So we got 4 right here. It looks like tomorrow night's probably going to be a pretty tough night for 7A Region 1.
Yeah, I hate it for them. I mean, it's Foley won the first region title in a long time, and I kind of wonder if Julio's going to come out here and watch it. But the problem is, they have the Perry Thompson kid, who's only a junior for Foley, is unbelievable. And Prim, who plays defensive end, is a fantastic player. But I watched the Central Phoenix City Dothan game. And so if you don't know anything about Dothan's in the east side of the city, or east side of the state. Dothan, it used to be
a big circle around it.
There used to be 2 schools over there. There used to be a Northview High School and a Dothan High School is what they call it, or Dothan, I guess. And so they financially, administrative-wise, they're paying too many people too much money, so they merged these 2 schools and they become Dothan High School and they become the Wolves. And so if you've never seen their helmets or anything, or if you're from the Wiregrass, you probably know more than others. But the school has not been around that long. And so they have a kid who plays running back for them. He had like 53 carries against Central Phoenix City, and they ended up losing the game by a touchdown to probably one of the most athletic teams in the Southeast. And, I guarantee he has 40 carries against Foley. I mean, they're going to do everything they can to keep Perry Thompson off the field and them throwing it up, because that's how. If you watch that Fairhope Foley game, Fairhope was wearing Foley out.
Yeah.
Realistically, I mean, they had them. I mean, they were doing everything they can. Then all of a sudden, Foley said, "Okay," but they tried it early and often. They just couldn't connect, and finally they started connecting with with Thompson. They start handing it off. They got the big kid back there who can run power and stuff. I mean, they got a good setup. I just hopefully they don't let this kid run the ball for 40 or 50 carries for 350 yards. I mean, that's the idea behind it, but we'll have to see.
Well, I haven't really figured out how I'm going to do it yet. How I'm going to get from Gulf Shores to Foley to Orange Beach in the same night.
Yeah, right.
Just to watch these kids, and because there's a lot of good talent down here. I'll tell you where I won't be going is over to Auburn, and because the Pirates have a very tough game tomorrow night. Fairhope travels to Auburn, and man, I mean that's just going to be we talked about how it was going to be a tough night. I think that may be probably the toughest night would be for Fairhope.
Yeah, I think Auburn beat Central Phoenix earlier in the year, and I mean they're just really, really sound defensively. And Fairhope, they've had a great year, and I think that it's just a tough matchup for them.
Yeah.
Athletically, I don't know if they're ready for that. I mean, if they win that one, that'd be phenomenal. But I just don't. Much I hate to tell you, I just don't see that happening, especially up there. I mean, those guys are really, really good. I mean, you're talking about, in this region in general. I mean, even at Central Phoenix, Mary G, they know good and well what they're about to get into.
Yeah.
I mean, if you turn that game on. If you turn it online, it looks like a college team. Central Phoenix does. Their offensive linemen all look like most of them probably are going to go play somewhere. And I mean they're absolutely huge, and they have skill kids all over the place.
Yeah, I don't quite know what the appeal was to Patrick for leaving Pinson Valley.
Probably. Well,
I can tell you exactly what the appeal was.
I think the appeal was his son was supposed to be at Auburn. He was going to be. If you don't know, Central Phoenix City is only 10 minutes from Auburn. And
you can throw a rock and hit Columbus.
Yeah, I mean them and Auburn. It's kind of like Orange Beach and Gulf Shores. Their city limits basically touch each other, and Opelika's stuck up in there too.
Well,
and you got Smith Station. There's like 4 cities. You don't even know which city you're in at any given time, but there's just a plethora of kids. Of athletes, and they're all coming, and there's some over in Georgia who they cross the state line and get into our school systems, from like Troup County and some of those guys. And there's athletes all over the place. Columbus, maybe Columbus school systems aren't the best, and you come over to Auburn, who has a great school system.
Yep.
I mean, I guarantee if you look at the roster, a lot of these kids they did not play Pee Wee football in Auburn, Alabama. They probably played in Columbus or freaking Troup County or some Beauregard or something. But, there's enough really good athletes to kind of push it around. But, I mean.
Yeah, I think I would be shocked if Mary G got past Central Phoenix in the first round because, I mean, that's just going to be like we said, it's going to be a tough night for Region 1. And then another one, I mean, even though Baker is the higher seed in this last game, I mean, Enterprise is just there seems to be a pattern with just like these two regions are just just if you haven't seen the pattern, you have your Wiregrass schools, and then you've got your coastal whatever Mobile, Baldwin County schools, and there just seems to be a lot of good coaching and a lot of talent, and just connected by one highway.
Well, a lot of it is down here. We have more private schools.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are no. I mean, I guess like Houston Academy is a private school, but it's not like going to UMS Wright. It's not like going to St. Paul's. It's a whole different animal. And so down here, I mean, if you got really good kids, I guarantee you UMS Wright and St. Paul's is reaching out to them and saying, hey, you can come over here, play baseball for us or whatever. And so you just you can't keep them all, and you have nowhere to get them because, like, the kids aren't moving from Mississippi. If they move from Mississippi, they stay in Mobile. They don't come over to Baldwin County. It's just a whole different, it's just life's just different in Baldwin County compared to places around. It's like Pensacola, you're not going to get kids from Pensacola High School to move over and go to Orange Beach because maybe housing prices is a little bit different and just getting settled it's just a different area. And so places like Central Phoenix and them, kids know they do good football and they'll jump over there. Enterprise, they got a kid, he's number 24, I think is his number, or number 23. He plays slot receiver, but they put him, I think he actually made the South All-Star team. And he comes in motion like every other play. They're going to hand it to him. They'll throw it to him. He's going to be on kickoffs and stuff. And they run. It looks like a normal offense until it's not because they have so many formations and they motion everybody. And so, I don't know if Baker has seen anybody like this. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do it in a week to get ready for Enterprise. Because Enterprise's base, these kids have been running basically the triple option for the last several years, and now they've gotten away from it, but they're still an option team. And I don't know anybody on their schedule over here who's an option team. Theodore's not. I don't know. I know McGill's not. Blunt, I know they don't run that. So, they just haven't seen it. It's going to be difficult.
Well, one thing I definitely want to touch on, especially Region 7, is not only do you got some star-studded kids with some big, offers to go play at some big schools, but you also have some really good coaches in this region. And I noticed you put that there. Just Keith Etheridge and Patrick Nix, those two guys. But then you got Ben Blackman, who has had so much success at Spanish Fort. Is he at Enterprise? Or is he?
He's at Central.
Central. No,
Nix is at Central. He's at Auburn. Is Keith Etheridge?
Ben Blackman is at Auburn. Keith Etheridge is at Auburn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Ben Blackman is at. Where did he go when he left Spanish Fort? Or is he still at Spanish Fort?
He's at Spanish Fort still.
Okay. All right.
I don't know. I messed that up. Obviously.
Well, I thought for some reason he may have left.
He did leave, but I'm trying to think where he went here. I don't know. I know he's not Enterprise. I don't know. You can edit all that.
I will leave that. Obviously that semifinal looks like it's going to be Central Phoenix and Auburn. I think Central Phoenix Enterprise could be a pretty good second round game. But overall, I think it's pretty straightforward. There's 8 teams here on this side of the bracket, and like I said, we got a bunch of local teams in there, but it's going to be a tough night for them tomorrow night.
Yeah. Overall, I think Shores and Orange Beach all have an opportunity to win. Some of the, and then you just have the Mobile schools who are probably going to tally some wins there too. But outside of that, between the Wiregrass area and that Auburn Montgomery area, they're probably going to hurt everybody's feelings because they're so athletic right now. And that's throughout all classifications.
One other thing we want to talk about was all these kids that made the South All-Star team and just how many. And you did mention how 90% of them were from the larger schools. We did talk about the kid from Highland Home, Kendarius Shepard, and Satterwhite from Lochapoka. But just in this area. You've got kids from St. Paul. You got DJ Jackson from Baldwin County. You got Chris Pearson at Orange. We've got their kids. There's kids all over down here that have made the South All-Star team, and that's a pretty big accomplishment. I know we've got some kids on it. Is there anybody that stands out to you? Cole Blaylock from UMS, right? But who stands out? Who's got? Their kids we're watching for. Who have some big time offers? Anybody like that stands out? I know that you got the kid from Foley, AJ Prim.
Well, the thing about Prim is, I think he made a team that a lot of the better players, I say the better ones, but some of the real playmakers are still juniors, so they're not eligible for this team.
Yeah.
These are only seniors, and so I mean, just like the wide out at Foley. I mean, he'll make the team next year, and he's a 5-star. He's going to be committed. He's already committed to Alabama as a junior, and I mean, he's going to. Yeah, make. I'll tell you, the kid is, and again, he's the UMS Wright kid, the Blaylock kid. I mean, he's been a player, and he's not like a huge. Like, I don't know if he will. He might. I think he's committed to USA or something as an athlete, but if you look at him, he's not the prototypical recruitable kid, and that's it's impressive that he made this thing just because his film. He's going to be everywhere, and he plays defense as well. So I mean, he's just going to be all over the place. And his film does the talking, but his measurables just aren't. Division I is tough because he's probably not big and tall enough right now.
Well, there are definitely a lot of kids on this list. I mean, it's a testament just to our area right now. Just with Baldwin County's growing faster than they can build houses, but. I mean, these schools are growing, and the talent level up here is increasing, and it's really cool to see. You got anything else you want to touch on?
I mean, in general, again, the whole idea of this is to educate everyone where some of these schools are. I mean, it's easy to say, "Hey, we're playing so and so," but we're not real sure where they are, and or who they are, or have they ever been any good. And so that's kind of our goal here, just kind of give you an idea of what you're looking to, and maybe the next couple of weeks you actually have a chance to go see a game. I mean, really, that's what we got going on. So like next week, after the first round, we'll come back and we'll say, okay, well, what was our surprises, and we'll see where everybody's heading next week, and it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of really good games next week, but it's exciting to have, especially having Gulf Shores and Orange Beach at home in the same week. This place is going to be crazy. I mean, it'll be a ghost town here Friday night. I mean, there won't be anybody.
Mass exodus.
Foley's at home too. I mean, you got Foley, Gulf Shores. I mean, you got the whole south of 98. Every single person is going to be at a football stadium or should watching these kids play. I mean, Fairhope.
Yeah, I mean, if you live in Gulf Shores or Orange Beach, and I mean, even Foley, like we said, Foley hasn't hosted a game, hasn't won a region title in a while. So I mean, this is a big opportunity for our area and for these kids. I mean, as much as we support locals in our area, I mean, it should be gridlock turning on the 6th tomorrow night, trying to get to the MIC. Canal Road is always gridlock, but it should be even more at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. It ought to be what it ought to be, and I think it's a pretty cool situation that we've kind of worked our way into here with high school football. So.
And what I got to say to parents of these kids, I mean, don't take it for granted. I mean, half the teams are not playing tomorrow night, or more than half the teams are not playing tomorrow night, and then after that, you'll be down to basically 16 in each, or whatever, 32 in each division or less. And so, if you got friends and family who the kids are playing, just don't take it for granted. Talk it up, make it a big deal, because there are a lot of kids who play high school football who never go to playoffs. I mean, we read some stats here talking about, hey, it's been 1993 since they've won a playoff game. I mean, it's just a whole nother animal. It's a whole different feeling when you win a playoff game and you look across and you know that basically you just ended these other guys' season and you get to go. It's just, as a kid playing football, it's a feeling like they'll never forget it. And as a community, make sure that you pat them on the back and tell them just how good of an accomplishment that is, because it's hard. It's hard to win playoff games. I mean, it is a hard thing, and it's not to be taken for granted for sure.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I got to say, too, just you put all this together, all this information. I mean, I learned everything that we talked about, even what I didn't know. I mean, I just read these notes, and, man, there's just such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to high school football right here. And I really appreciate you taking the time to put all this together, because it's just everything we talked about. I mean, it's new to me for the most part. I don't know where I know where they're at, but I can't tell you what they've done the last 5 years. I mean, but that's what makes this exciting is when you have the local teams succeeding. I mean, it kind of makes you want to dive in and figure this stuff out because, I mean, Alabama, the state of Alabama, we care about college football so much. I mean, but if you get into some of these places, like I mentioned, Central Clay County, I mean, there's some places that we love our kids and we love our high school and we love our community. So definitely a big night tomorrow and moving forward for some of these things.
Yeah, I've had this useless information that I've been hoarding for years and years that I like to know what's going on. I have friends all over the state who are coaches. I got friends who are in other states who are coaches, just people that you know. And I follow them, and I want to know if there's a guy I've ever met or something, and they're coaching somewhere. I want to be supportive of them. If they need stuff, we try to help them out. And I every Saturday or Sunday, I always have several conversations with several coaches around this state and other states, just because I want to know, what's happening and what's going on in these coaching circles, because it's a big deal, and you guys need to. I mean, y'all deserve to know where these places are if you're not geographically. Because, again, most of these people in our area, it's not like, 80% of the people who are living in Gulf Shores, they didn't grow up in Gulf Shores. So we're over saying these school names, acting like you guys know where Brantley is or something. And, you have no idea. So
I remember when we first started talking about the show, you said guys got a football show, don't know nothing about football, and that's why I surround myself with you guys because y'all help me. It's just fun for me, but y'all really do. Y'all provide a lot of knowledge just diving into this. So I can't wait till next week. We sit down and talk about this again, and looking forward to watching the games tomorrow night and just see where it winds up. This is a pretty exciting time. So, Well, all right. Well, there it is. The first edition of that sounded really country. The first edition of Unrivaled Prep, and it's the playoffs. So, I appreciate you hopping on and hanging out. And man, we'll see you next week.
That's it.
All right.
Thanks.